Welcome back, everyone. I'm Captchz, and today I'm going to be bringing you the fifth installment for our Miss Marvel reaction, review, and comparison. And yes, we are going to be doing episode 5. It just dropped yesterday, so every Wednesday, Miss Marvel is out, and we got a lot of information in this episode. We got a lot of information about Aisha. We got information about the bangle, Kamala's heritage. We got a little bit more information about Bruno and Cameron. So a lot of stuff that happened in this video. This episode, and I'm gonna be kind of breaking it down for you. And there's not gonna be much comparison to the comics in this episode. I will put a few panels up there and kind of show you how things were kind of compared, and it'll be mainly towards the end, unfortunately. So I'm going to briefly talk about kind of the whole episode right now and give you guys a little bit of a breakdown, and then towards the end you'll see a little bit more of the comparison to the comics. Before we start, don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share. This will definitely help out my channel. We're getting up there in subscribers, so just trying to bump that up as much as possible. Hopefully you've been enjoying the content. I appreciate all the views. Let's go ahead and get started. Alright, so in the beginning of the episode, we encountered Aisha, and she's with her current village, right? And then the British are there because they're trying to, take over. And so Aisha sees this man at the village, and he's getting kind of bullied by the British people, and she ends up following him. She follows him to his village, and that's where she actually meets him in person, and they start talking. And then later on in the beginning, they get married, and then they have their daughter, which is Sana, which is Kamala's grandmother. So one evening while they're at the village, Aisha sees a figure in the garden area. So she goes out to the garden area, and it's Najma, which is Kamran's mom. And Najma's pretty much telling Aisha, like, oh, this is where you've been hiding. Are you ready to go? Like, let's go back home. And Aisha already started off this whole family, so she's pretty much lied to Najma, and she tells her that, I hid the bangle, and it's going to take, a couple days to find it. And Najma doesn't even believe Aisha. So what ends up happening is, after Aisha goes back and talks to the husband, whether it's a day or so, they obviously don't let us know how the time frame works, but she tells the husband that they need to leave and they need to go right now, and that everybody's leaving, and why are we going to stay? And the husband's like, well, this is my family, this is my home, and my great grandfather built this house, everything like that. And Aisha pretty much tells him, like, wherever we are, that's where our home's going to be. So super sweet, but there's a crisis that's happening, and Aisha's trying to protect her family the best way possible. So they end up leaving. They go to the train station, and while they're going to find a spot, pretty much because it's so crowded, because everyone's trying to leave, Aisha wanders by herself. She tells her husband, like, take Sana, and I'm gonna be right back. So Aisha is going, and she's walking through all these crowds of people, and then she runs into Najma. So Najma knows she was there. She was already pretty much tracking her, everything like that. They have like a little conversation, and then bang, Najma stabs Aisha in the stomach. While Aisha's hurt, she's like stumbling to try to go back to find the family, and she falls down like on this sack of whatever, vegetables or whatever it is. She just falls on and lays down on this sack. And so what ends up happening is she uses her power, and you can see it in their eyes, like they start to glow or something like that. Can't really tell exactly what it is. And then it reverts kind of back to where this ripple in time happened, and what actually brought Kamala almost back to the future, to 1941, which is that time period. 1942 is where Aisha is at the train station. All this partition was happening, and then the train, the Karachi train, everything like that. So at the end of episode 4, we thought Kamala kind of got stuck in this time period, 1941. Nobody kind of really notices her. They don't really notice the outfit she's wearing, so she's almost like a ghost for the most part. But Kamala ends up finding Aisha, and Aisha gives her the family photo of Aisha, the husband, and her grandmother, Sana. So she takes it and she was like, oh my gosh, like it led you back to me. And Kamala's kind of still confused about what's going on, and she's pretty much saying, and Aisha's telling Kamala like, oh, like take care of my family, like, you know, protect them, things like that. So Kamala goes and she ends up finding Sana, which is pretty cool because that's her grandmother, you know, as a baby, and Kamala's a teenager already. So she ends up finding her, and Kamala actually uses her powers to kind of help Sana get through the crowd of people. So she builds like these little steps that Sana's running through, and then eventually one of them breaks, and then Sana is actually controlling the hard light, is what they call it. She's controlling the hard light with her hand, and her father sees it, which is Kamala's, you know, grandfather. And he's kind of surprised, like, what the heck is happening? Like, there's a couple people that notice, but not too many. So that's kind of where that scene happens. And from there, it kind of goes back into the current present. So from the power of the bangle, it brings Kamala back to the current time. But it's almost like she never left, because she was laying down on the floor, like, right after Najma hit the bracelet, and it kind of made that ripple. It looked like it kind of exploded, but then when they go back to it, it looks like they didn't even really move from this universe or dimension. So what ends up happening is we see this ripple in the sky that's kind of floating. It's kind of like sparking out, and one of the characters that Najma's with calls it the veil. She's like, oh, the veil's open, we can go back to our time. So she goes and stands right in front of it, and it kills her, and it's like almost like she's like charcoal, and so like her skin gets all black, and then it like charcoals off, and then the skeleton and everything like that. And then so pretty much killed her, and they weren't able to go back. And Kamala and Najma are having a few exchanges of words, things like that. And the only one way to kind of close this veil is for Najma, as what it appears to, you know, off herself. She's like, I'm the one that can close it. I'm going to do it. So right when she does that, she calls out Kamran's name, and pretty much her powers transfer all the way to Kamran. And that's all we see of Kamala as far as that big fight scene, and so she's just left there. And so Najma's gone, the veil's gone, and it's just Kamala, and then her grandmother and her mom show up, and they're worried, of course, because she's been running out on the town, and she hasn't picked up her phone, all these things like that. And remember, all this happened from episode 3, so it's quite a long period without, you know, the family seeing Kamala or hearing from Kamala. Now, this is where some of the comparison comes into the comic books, because once the grandmother and Kamala's mom find her, Kamala's mom is obviously convinced that Kamala's this superhero person that they've been seeing on the news. And Kamala, you know, is like, oh, I'm sorry I didn't tell you, all that stuff. And then, you know, she's like, it's okay, like, I'm just glad you're fine, everything like that. So it's kind of subtle, and Kamala's mom kind of takes it very easily. And that's also how it is in the comic books, because towards the end of the first series of Miss Marvel, there's this big attack that happens on Jersey City. And at the end of the episode, Kamala just can't take not letting her parents know who she is, or at least somebody, you know, it's hard for you to keep your identity and keeping it a secret. So she ends up telling the mom, like, oh, I'm Miss Marvel. And then the mom in the comic is just pretty much like, oh, I know. Like, you don't think I have noticed? Like, you always in these situations at these right times, and always disappearing at these times that this destruction is happening. So that's a little bit of comparison to the comic book that I've seen throughout the episode. So it was pretty cool. And put up some panels, and you'll be able to see some of that. So at the last couple minutes of the show, we see Cameron waiting outside of the Circle Q, and he's waiting for Bruno, and then he sees Bruno throwing out the trash, and he's like, hey, how's it going? And Bruno's kind of like weird, like, oh, what are you doing, like, waiting in the trash area. And so pretty much Bruno needs a place to lay low, because of everything that happened in episode 3, where his mother pretty much ditched him and left him to fend off for himself. So him and Bruno are connecting a little bit. And then there's this drone that we would assume is from damage control, and it spots Cameron. And what ends up happening is, since Cameron got transferred these powers from his mom, and I don't know how that physically works, but he got them transferred from Najma when she closed the veil and she said his name. He ends up doing this blast from his hand, like his fist area, and it hits the drone. The drone circles down underneath, and the whole circle cube below them just explodes. And that is pretty much where the episode has left us. And I just come to find out that I say pretty much a lot, so sorry about that. I forget which episode it was, but I do show you, I believe it was episode 2, where we meet Cameron, possibly episode 3. And I showed a little bit of panels of Cameron's actual powers, because when he's introduced in the comic books, he is affected by the Terrigen Mist and considered an inhuman. And he's able to use similar powers as Kamala without all the stretchiness and things like that, as far as we see. So in the comics, he does have this power that he's able to generate from inside his body, and he's able to, shoot it out, or he can get an object and assert his power to that object and like throw it almost like a hand grenade in the comics, and that's his power. And he actually, he almost, if you're familiar with Iceman, he almost looks like Iceman in the comics. So he's like blue and like see-through and stuff like that. It's pretty cool. So I'm wondering if he will do that transformation in possibly episode 6. That'd be pretty nice. So my take on this episode, it was a little lower on my grading scale. It was about maybe like a 7 out of 10. Just because we got a lot of backstory of Aisha and the backstory of, her life and what's happening and all this stuff. I don't really think we needed all this information. They could have taken a total like U-turn on it, but it was nice to see how the MCU is developing the story of Miss Marvel, and I'm just hoping, episode 6, that there's a good finale. Still rooting for Carol Danvers to show up at least. Even Rambo, if anything, that would be pretty dope. So it was about a 7 out of 10 for me. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. I pretty much broke down the entire episode. I think 3/4 of the episode was mainly just about the background of Kamala and Aisha and all that stuff. So don't forget to subscribe, like, comment, and share, and I'll see you next week.